First of all, welcome to our Fibromyalgia Awareness Day celebration. As you know, I don't know if everybody knows, but the Fibromyalgia Awareness is actually in honor of Florence Nightingale. She had fibromyalgia, or was supposed to have fibromyalgia. That's what they figured that she had. So fibromyalgia has been around for a long time under different names. Anyway, I'm really happy we have some wonderful speakers, and it's my honor to introduce Michelle Davis. Michelle is the Community Engagement Specialist at Tweed, Canada's largest licensed producer of cannabis for medical purposes. She educates and builds meaningful relationships with patients, organizations, caregivers, social service providers, and more, furthering the public's understanding of quality cannabis products, services, and therapeutic applications. She also builds awareness of Canada's medical cannabis system and associated health care resources. She holds a bachelor degree in biological science and has experience within the company working as a grower previous to community engagement. She enjoys discussing all aspects of the cannabis industry, focusing on cannabis education and awareness. She's based in Toronto, Ontario. Please help me to welcome Michelle. Thank you, Michelle.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'll keep the presentation rolling right along, pardon the pun, just because I want to be able to give you guys a chance to ask me any questions that you have. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So just to provide a little bit more history on my background with the company. So, as Marianne said, I started as a grower, and it was a really good place to start within the company. I got to know the different strains of cannabis that we grow, our growing procedures, how it all kind of fits within the framework that Health Canada lays out, which I'll get into more detail. From there, I was able to move into a role in our customer service department. So I actually worked on the phones, talking to people who have their prescription for cannabis or who are interested in getting it. Essentially just a phone line that really anyone from the public could call us and ask us questions. And from there, I was able to take those two sides of my experience and begin my current role, which is community engagement. So it's a really nice job. I get to go out into the community, provide education presentations like this, and just kind of try to help answer people's questions when it comes to cannabis. So that's what today's presentation is going to be. Simply educational, a bit of a Cannabis 101, talking about how cannabis is used therapeutically and how people find it beneficial. And then, like I say, I'll keep it concise so that I can take everyone's questions at the end as well. So we'll go ahead and get started. So a bit of a quick disclaimer. Obviously, I'm not a doctor. That decision about whether medical cannabis is the right choice for you is that discussion between yourself and the healthcare provider. My role here today is simply provide some information, provide some education, and hopefully be able to answer some questions for people. So what we'll talk about today then is I'm going to provide a little bit of clarification between the difference between Spectrum and Tweed, the company that I work for. We're going to talk about the Spectrum itself, that chart that you see on the pull-up banner and how it's used. We'll talk about the cannabis plant, its therapeutic benefits, how people find it beneficial, why they use it. We'll talk about different ways that you can use cannabis, safe and responsible choices for cannabis products and uses. We'll talk about how to actually access medical cannabis, and then of course support and resources that we provide, and then again I'll be happy to answer questions that anybody has. Perfect timing, we were just about to get started. Come on in. All good. So to get started then, and talk a little bit more about the company itself. So I'm here today representing Spectrum Cannabis, but let me give you a little bit of clarification as to how that fits into our company as a whole. So the overreaching name of our company is Canopy Growth, which is how some people know us. And then we have several brands that fall under the Canopy Growth name, one of which is Tweed, one of which is also Spectrum Cannabis. So Tweed is the brand that we offer our cannabis to our customers under. And our main head office is in Smiths Falls, Ontario, in the old Hershey factory. And when I worked on our customer care line, that's the department that I worked in, is up in the old chocolate factory. And people would call and say, oh, you work in the chocolate factory. We used to come through and do samples and tours, and not so big on the samples anymore, obviously. Not so big on the tours either. Health Canada is fairly restrictive with who we do allow on site. So unfortunately, they don't allow the public on site. But hopefully that'll change as the legislation loosens up a little bit, but time will tell. So like I say, that Smiths Falls location is our main head office. Shipping, receiving, our customer care department, our growing rooms, things like that. Pretty much everything that goes into making it our head office. Now, the site I started at is the second one down, Tweed Farms. So what that is it's a 1 million square foot glass greenhouse facility. And what they do there is they just grow. That's why it's called the farm. So there's no customer support, there's no shipping department or anything like that. It's simply just the growing that happens at Tweed Farms. It's different than the grow rooms that we have up in our Smiths Falls site in the sense that the Tweed Farms location is a glass greenhouse. So we work quite closely with the sun and recycled rainwater, whereas the growing conditions up at our Smiths Falls location are indoor. So we control the lighting, we control the temperatures. Both produce quality product, just slightly different growing conditions. Now, we also offer resource centers in Toronto, Guelph, Barrie, and Hamilton. No actual product on site at these resource centers, just more of a face-to-face location if people want to come in, get help with forms, consultations on what strains might be right for them, essentially just a face-to-face version of our customer care. So to provide some clarification where Spectrum falls into all of this, Spectrum is one of our brands that we offer, and it's more of our international medical-facing brand, which is why I wanted to come as Spectrum today, to talk more about cannabis in its very therapeutic uses, and to help simplify the dialogue around cannabis using our color-coded Spectrum system. So to talk more about the Spectrum itself and what it's based on, and we'll get into a lot more detail about this. So all of the products that we sell are all sorted through our Spectrum, which is a color-coded system based on THC and CBD levels. And I'm going to talk in a lot more detail about THC and CBD, but suffice to say, the bottom half of the chart shows CBD levels, and the top half of the chart shows THC levels. So depending on why someone is using cannabis, the effects they want to get, that's primarily based on THC and CBD levels. So what we're doing is trying to sort it into colors to make it easier for our customers to choose what's right for them. So the Spectrum goes from yellow to red. And again, I'm going to clarify what THC and CBD are in the next few slides. But what we would call our yellow products would be our products with our highest levels of CBD with little to no THC. And then we transition through the spectrum until we get to red, which is our highest levels of THC with little to no CBD. And like I say, I'm going to get into a lot more detail about THC and CBD to help clarify how that chart works. So, medical cannabis. So I always like to start by talking about the plant itself. So what you can see there is a picture of a cannabis bud. And I always like to clarify this, that when we're talking about cannabis products, the part of the cannabis plant that we're using is the bud. So when we grow the plant, we grow only the female plants. And I don't know if anyone's ever seen a cannabis plant before, but it's a fairly sticky looking shrub in some senses, covered in those very stereotypical 5-pointed leaves. And the female plant produces these buds, so that's why we only grow the female plants. The buds appear on the branches, and just like apples or peaches or strawberries, we have to wait for the buds to reach the right maturity, and then we're able to harvest them. So we harvest them, and we're able to remove the buds from the plants, trim them, and dry them. And then Health Canada regulates how we're able to offer that product to our customers. Because we are a licensed producer, what that means is that Health Canada has given us a license to be able to grow and sell cannabis to those who have a prescription for it. So Health Canada dictates the rules we have to follow. They control our regulation, our testing, and essentially allow us to operate in a legal framework. So if you do have your authorization to access medical cannabis from your doctor, what that means is that that medical document would be sent to a licensed producer, like ourselves. An account would be open for the individual, and they could order their cannabis online or on the phone, and it would all come in the mail. Anything outside of that framework currently isn't legal here in Canada. In the news, you'll hear talk about this upcoming cannabis bill, the Bill C-45, which is going to legalize cannabis on a recreational level, and that's pending approval come this summer. And what that's going to allow for is a separate market from the medical market for those who want to use cannabis medicinally. Today, we're going to talk about cannabis, specifically how it's used medicinally, so I won't get into a lot about the upcoming legislation for the recreational use of cannabis, just because it is a totally, completely separate market. But if at the end, if anyone has any questions about it, I'll be happy to answer them. But to kind of get back on track then, so with Health Canada dictating what we can and cannot do, once we've harvested the buds from the cannabis plant, we're allowed to offer it to our customers in two ways. We can either offer it to them as that dried bud that we removed from the plant, trimmed off the leaves and dried it. So if someone was purchasing that dried bud, they would have to smoke it or inhale it in some capacity. They could bake or cook with it. The other way that we're able to offer our cannabis products is we can take that bud and we can extract the helpful compounds from it. And what we do is we mix it with an edible oil. So in that case, what an individual would do is they would ingest that oil and get the effects from there. Whether they take that edible oil and they mix it with something, coffee, tea, yogurt, it has a fairly distinctive taste of cannabis, so most people like to mix it with something. Or you can also swallow it in a small capsule. And I'm going to get into a lot more detail about those two modes of administration. But the point I'm trying to make is, although you can make a lot of different products from the cannabis bud, you can make concentrates like hashish. Sometimes you'll hear terms like shatter or butter or dabs. Things like that, legally, no one's allowed to make. Legally, the only cannabis products that you can access are the ones produced by a licensed producer, so either the dried bud or that edible oil. So very briefly, just to talk about how cannabis interacts with your system and why people find it so beneficial, especially for things like pain management. So running all throughout your body is a system that's called the endocannabinoid system. And what it consists of is a series of receptors. And what the endocannabinoid system does is it works to maintain regulation. So it maintains homeostasis in your body. And it plays a role in a bunch of different processes. Things to do with mood, memory, pain, sleep, appetite, a really large array of processes. And the way it works is it communicates through these various receptors to trigger responses. And the way it communicates is by your body releasing these endocannabinoids. So for example, let's say you slammed your finger in a door, then endocannabinoids would be released, they would interact with the receptors, and they would trigger your finger to swell. Or let's say you were hungry, your body would release endocannabinoids, trigger your stomach to growl, stimulate an appetite, for example. So the reason people use cannabis for such a wide variety of symptoms is because the endocannabinoid system is involved in such a wide variety of processes. Whether it's physical relief of symptoms such as pain, stiffness, inflammation, or whether it's more to do so with sleep or mood elevation. Either way, the endocannabinoid system plays a role. So therefore, when people are ingesting cannabis, either in that dried form or in that oil form, you're introducing cannabinoids into your system, ones that are naturally occurring in the cannabis plant. Our endocannabinoid system, those receptors, they recognize those cannabinoids that you've ingested from the cannabis plant, and they'll interact with the receptors to trigger responses. So, depending on the kind of responses someone wants to trigger, or the kind of effects they want to get, the kind of symptoms they're trying to relieve, all has to do with the different levels of cannabinoids that they're introducing. There's a lot of different cannabinoids in the cannabis plant, over 100, but we're going to focus on the two most important today, THC and CBD. Perfect timing, you guys. Yeah, grab a seat there. So, to talk about, therefore, the THC and the CBDs. THC and CBD, again, is what our chart is based on. And really, the levels of THC and CBD dictates what product choices people are going to make. So we're going to get into quite a bit of detail about these two cannabinoids. So THC. THC is the most common cannabinoid found within the cannabis plant. And it's what we call the psychoactive effect of cannabis. For lack of a better word, it's what gives you the high. So when you're ingesting products that have THC, which is the upper half of our chart, you're going to be experiencing the effects of a high. So it can be very euphoric, pleasant. People will use it for pain management, sleep, appetite, anxiety, mood elevation, a wide range of reasons you'll see people use products with THC. Can help with nausea, things such as this. So really it depends on the person and the symptoms they're trying to relieve for why they're using that THC. THC is measured in percentages. So something that is at a 3% THC is going to affect you quite a bit differently than something at a 25% THC, for example. So a person's experience level and the kind of effects they want to get, that'll depend a lot on that THC percentage. And because THC is the cannabinoid that is responsible for the high associated with cannabis, it's also the one that we tell people to be the most responsible with, the one to play it safe with. So for example, if you were new to cannabis and we were chatting on the phone about what might be a good choice for you, and if you said, I've never used cannabis before in my life, then we would probably stick with THC levels that, probably aren't going to get much higher than 5 or 7%. If you were someone who was quite experienced and you really wanted those strong effects of the THC, then you would be moving up the chart, maybe getting into more of the orange and red products. Generally, we don't see a THC percentage that exceeds 30%. So you're not really going to see products that get over that amount. But you'll see THC levels in the products anywhere between 0 to 30. And so again, depending on why someone's using it, that would help dictate the THC level that they're choosing. CBD. And this is the one that I really want to focus on today, especially specific to pain management. So CBD is what we call the non-psychoactive cannabinoid found in cannabis. It's the second most common one. And what it is it does not produce that euphoria or that high that we associate with THC. You don't have an impaired feeling. You don't have any kind of those psychoactive effects. So when people are using products with CBD, they're using it more so for physical relief. And a really big one is pain management. Stiffness, inflammation, muscle tremors, spasticity, seizure control. When you hear of children, for example, who are using cannabis products to help control seizures, it would be a CBD product most likely that they would be using. Now, although it doesn't produce any kind of a high, people also find that it can be quite successful in also helping with anxious feelings, kind of a leveling out that mood. The reason that the CBD is so effective with the pain management, stiffness, and inflammation that we're talking about is because the THC molecule that we talked about in the previous slide, it actually fits in the endocannabinoid receptors and triggers responses. The CBD, it doesn't actually fit, so it more sits on top and blocks feelings of pain, blocks the signals to make things stiff and inflamed, it actually buffers against the effects of THC as well, which is why people think that it helps with those anxious feelings as well. So again, no high associated with the CBD. It's more of that physical relief. And there's a couple things that I usually recommend to people when they're new to medical cannabis and they do want to start using it, and specifically for pain management. There's a few tips that we generally give, and a lot of it comes down to an individual's experience level. So for example, if someone was brand new to cannabis and they said, I'm going to be using cannabis primarily for pain management, so I really want to focus on the CBD side of things, we'd say that's fine, no problem, that's great. And then it's up to the individual with how much THC they may want to introduce. So if you were brand new and you really didn't have any interest in the high associated with cannabis, we would talk about starting with yellow products, for example. CBD on their own with just trace amounts of THC, so you don't need to worry about any kind of a high. And there's one thing that we do generally accept about THC and CBD, is they generally work better when they are together. But that being said, what we'll sometimes say to people is, if you don't want to get into the THC right now, that's okay. CBD on its own may be good enough. So people sometimes just start with CBD on its own and see if that's enough. Sometimes it's not quite effective as people want it to be. So then they may think about introducing low levels of THC, depending on their comfort level, to try to enhance those effects of pain management. Because again, it seems to be when the two are working together is when they're working best. But everyone's different, depends on the person, depends on your experience level, the time and the place that you'd be using the product. And certainly keeping in mind that a lot of people choose more than one product, depending on the time of day and when and how they're using it. So let's talk a little bit more then about actual product choice and what might be appropriate. So again, bringing everything back to that spectrum, which now makes a little bit more sense now that we've talked about our THC and our CBD levels, but it's essentially what we call the cannabinoid profile, that makeup of THC and CBD within the strains that people are looking at. And every color on the spectrum plays its role. There is a use for all the different products that fall within that spectrum. Because like I say, people use the cannabis products for relief of so many different kinds of symptoms. There's a use for everything that falls from within the high CBD ends of the yellow to the high THC ends of the red. All those products play a role for someone. So to give you an example of what you would actually see on the website if you were making product choices, and I tried to show examples of products that have been shown to be quite effective for pain management. So the product that we're looking at here today is green number 3. So with it being green, we know that's going to be a product that has higher levels of CBD with a lower amount of THC in it. It's one step above our yellow. This is a dried product. You'll see that it's priced per gram, $8.50 per gram. Anything that's priced per gram is always a dried product. Underneath the name, green number 3, you'll see a THC level of 7.1% and a CBD level of 11.4%. So again, this is a great example of a product that would be helpful for pain management. You have that CBD for the physical relief, the stiffness, the inflammation, the feelings of pain themselves, blocking those feelings. And then you also have the addition of THC, help your body feel more relaxed, feel a little bit better. And again, with the two of them together, they're going to be complementing one another. Yes, please. Absolutely. Yep, I'm going to get to that next. Perfect. So hybrid, just to quickly clarify, so there's generally 2 strains of cannabis plants, sativas and indicas. It's generally accepted that sativas tend to be a little bit euphoric, a little bit more uplifting, and indicas tend to be a little bit more calming, a little bit more relaxing. So with this being a hybrid strain, there would be a combination of both those effects. So it would be a nice kind of mid-level of those effects. Beside that word hybrid, it's difficult to see. There's a half sun that's grayed out, the full sun that's purple, and then there's a moon that's grayed out as well. What those are indicating is the half sun's for morning, the full sun's for day, the moon is for night. So it's essentially recommending when this might be a good time to use the product. It's not to say it cannot be used at night, but the fact that that moon is not illuminated is to say it's not strong enough to make you feel tired. Some people specifically choose their cannabis products to help them fall asleep. So what they're trying to say here is, again, this is a good product that you can use generally during the day, but don't think it's going to be strong enough to help you sleep at night. When people are looking for products specifically strong enough to help them fall asleep, which would be a little bit higher levels of THC, that's when you would see that moon illuminated. Across from that is a green circle with a QA in it. And what that is the quality assurance report to go along with the product. So because we are regulated by Health Canada, that is who controls what we do. Once we've grown the product, we send it off-site to a laboratory to get tested by Health Canada. And they test for everything you can think of. Molds, pesticides, chemicals, contaminants, fungus. They confirm our moisture levels. They confirm our THC and our CBD levels. It's a really, really extensive testing process that the product goes through, understandably. Yes, please. So it's grown all throughout Canada. We're the largest in Canada, so we have grow sites all across the country. Yeah, yeah. That's just the way they have it set up, is with the government regulating it. Well, right now this is the system that we operate in. So once everything's passed through the quality assurance report, we're allowed to make the product available for sale, and we post that report to go along with it so our customers can view it. Underneath that large circle with all the colors, that's the terpenes within the product. Now, there's different terpenes in the cannabis plant, and most of them are considered for how the taste and the smell of the plant is that's kind of what it's influenced by. People also feel that sometimes the terpenes also affect the actual effects of cannabis can be affected by the terpene levels as well, but most people consider the terpenes for the taste and the smell. Not all cannabis is really stinky and skunky. You can get some that are quite floral, fruity, tropical, spicy, and that has to do with those terpene levels. The product itself would come in that little jar, and then again, with this being the dried product, it would be full of little green buds. Now, so that was the dried form, and then again, the other way we offer it is in that oil form. So this is an example of one of our oil products. You can see it's priced per bottle. That's a 40 milliliter bottle, so that would probably last someone about a month to give you a sense of perspective. Now, with this being a yellow product, this would be one of our products that we would consider to be CBD exclusive primarily, with only trace amounts of THC. This would be a product that we would say to someone, it's non-psychoactive, it's not going to give you any kind of a high, because it's that CBD product. Now, that also says hybrid, but it's not as important because there aren't the effects of the THC. You're not going to get those same high or relaxed or euphoric effects. So it's not as important. Again, you see your daytime icons illuminated. And again, not to say it can't be used at night, but just don't anticipate this is going to make you feel sleepy. We also have our quality assurance report, and then of course the terpenes there. And then you see an example of the bottle, and that bottle comes with a small syringe. So the individual would extract the dose that they want, add it to however they want to consume it, and then they would ingest it and get the effects from there. So to provide a little bit more detail, the difference between that dried and the oil. So if you were using the dried product, you would have to presumably inhale it in some capacity. Whether that's in the very stereotypical sense of rolling it or putting it in a pipe or a water pipe. But essentially you would have to apply a flame and then you would be inhaling the smoke. Now, what we recommend, and generally what's considered to be the safer alternative to smoking it, is what's called a vaporizer. And that's what you see there are examples of vaporizers. So the way the vaporizer works is you put the dried product in the device, and the device heats up. But it doesn't actually heat up hot enough to combust the product. It just heats up hot enough to release that helpful THC and CBD in the form of a vapor. And then that vapor is inhaled, usually through a small straw, like a tube, and you would inhale it, and you would get the effects from there. Because you're not actually inhaling the smoke, it's generally considered easier on your throat, easier on your lungs, cuts down on the taste, cuts down on the smell. We usually say to people, if you're going to be using the dried product on a long-term basis, consider getting a vaporizer. As well, because it's considered a medical assistive device, ODSP will actually cover some or all of the cost of a vaporizer, which is quite helpful. Now, when you're inhaling the product, you're going to feel the effects relatively instantaneously, usually within a couple minutes. And the effects usually last anywhere between 2 to 4 hours. The oil, again, you would be ingesting that oil, so your body needs to process it. So it usually takes a little bit longer for the effects to be felt, usually an hour or two before the effects are felt. And then the effects themselves, that says 4 to 10, I generally say 6 to 8 hours. So it's more long-lasting than the dried. So it's personal preference. One is no better than the other. And again, a lot of it comes down to time and place. So for example, let's say I was using cannabis for pain management. I might use the yellow oil during the day, for example. If I was at work, I want to stay clear-headed. I'm going to use the oil, so I'm not always getting up from my desk to use my vaporizer. But then I get home, I'm really tired, I feel lousy, and I want that relief right away. Maybe this time I'll use a dried product, and maybe I'll use a product with some THC because I'm at home relaxing for the evening. So it depends on the person, depends on what they're comfortable with. Yeah, please. Now, with the dried product, because those effects kick in quite quickly, most people find that they're sleepy quite quickly after using it. Versus the oils, where you'd have to wait for those effects to be felt. Everyone's different though. I was actually talking to a lady the other day and she said she'll use her dried product and then sit and watch TV for about an hour before she starts to feel sleepy. So it depends on the person. Yeah, or two. It honestly depends on the person. Everyone is affected differently by cannabis, but people quickly get to know what works for them and kind of get their own little pattern. So that experience level is a really, really big thing that we rely upon when we make recommendations to people for what might be appropriate for them, especially because we do really want to be cautious with those effects of the THC. We want to make this a pleasant, helpful experience for people. Cannabis, of course, isn't for everyone. That's why that discussion does start with the doctor. Age, medical history, medications you're on, things such as that, all have to be considered when talking about medical cannabis and whether it might be appropriate. Certainly there's situations where some people feel that perhaps their physician isn't educated enough maybe to ask the right questions about cannabis or make the right recommendations. If that's the case, there's a program that we offer called a Certified Partners Program. And what it is it allows us to refer an individual to a doctor who specializes in prescribing cannabis. They know the questions to ask. They know the right recommendations to make. The process starts through our website, and I've brought some cards today up at the front if anyone wants to grab one to check out the website. But it all starts on the website under the tab that says Find a Physician. An individual enters in their information, and we reach out to them, and we're able to start the process where we can refer you to this doctor. It's quite transparent, and as much as you're comfortable with, we'll share the notes back with your own doctor if you'd like, but it's quite an easy, transparent process, making cannabis a little bit more accessible for everyone.
I have a question. I went to see my doctor about this, and he won't prescribe it at all. And he says, just go to one of the clinics and you can get it. But from what you're saying, if I went to a clinic, is there a doctor there who has to prescribe it? What are these clinics?
I'm not too familiar with the clinics. Some of them charge a fee. Some of them, they do have doctors. I know they do because people, they get the prescriptions. I don't know a lot about them though. Yeah, do you have?
Apollo Research, do you know about that?
Yeah, so that's an example. So Apollo would be an example of one of those clinics. Yeah, I mean they're legit.
Have you gone to one? Do they charge?
There's some administration fee. I don't remember how much. And of course, you have to pay for the oil itself.
Of course.
Yeah. So the
They
cert.
don't give you all the information, like you said, ODSP. But I think that people are on the regular ODSP, it's Ontario disability. But if you are on CPP disabilities, as I am, they do cover some stuff too.
Yeah, we generally recommend our Certified Partners Program. There's no fee associated with that. As well, you get all of that support from trained staff like myself. There's no cost. Yeah, it's covered. Yeah, it's covered. So as long as you have an OHIP card, and like I say, I have some cards there with our website and the phone number, which are the two best places to start. So very briefly, just some of those undesirable effects when you are feeling the effects of THC too strongly. It can be unpleasant. It's not harmful. It's going to pass. I generally would tell people, try to lie down, try to relax. It is going to pass. But again, it just reinforces that point of being nice and cautious with those THC levels. Dosing nice and low and slow, and really taking your time to figure out what's an effective dose for you without getting into, like I say, feeling those effects of THC too strongly. One of the other things I brought today as well is a medical cannabis journal. It's really helpful, we find, when you journal your cannabis doses, when you're taking it, when you're feeling the effects, to try to make it a little bit more reliable when you're doing your dosing. So, the actual next steps to accessing medical cannabis. If you decided medical cannabis was the route you wanted to take, your next step would be talking to the doctor, whether that's your own or the doctor you've been referred to, and actually getting the medical authorization. That authorization document gets faxed or mailed from the doctor's office directly to a licensed producer, such as ourselves. An account gets opened, and the individual is able to start ordering online or on the phone, and everything comes in the mail. When we receive the medical authorization from the doctor, there's two pieces of information on it. There's how much cannabis is being prescribed on a grams per day basis, and how long the authorization is for, maximum 1 year. So depending on how large a person's authorization is, but let's use an example of 2 grams per day, for example. If we received an authorization for 2 grams per day, what we do is we turn that into a 30-day ordering cycle. So we would take that 2 grams and we would say, you're allowed 60 grams every 30 days. Or if it was 1 gram per day, they would be allowed 30 grams every 30 days, for example. Everyone's prescription size is different. So within that 30 days, an individual could order as much as they wanted up to their maximum, or as little as they wanted. We don't monitor it. So some people will order one large order right at the beginning and get their whole order at the beginning of their 30 days. Some people will split it up into multiple different orders, especially if they want to try different products. Some people won't touch their accounts for months, which is fine. It doesn't matter to us. You order your cannabis when you're ready. You use it how you want to use it. We don't monitor when you do or do not order. Our role is to simply be there to provide support, give you advice, recommendations on what you might like to choose for the most effective benefits. And of course, a signature required upon delivery. They can't just drop it on your doorstep and walk away when it comes in the mail. And it's very discreet packaging. We never get any complaints about a smell or anyone knowing what it is. It's just a white bag. It doesn't even say our name on it. It just shows up. Yeah, please.
If you ship your can in post and you have a postal box, you can't get a signature, right?
So what they do is they would leave you the notice, and then you would just have to retrieve it from the post person. Yeah. So at this time, unfortunately, cannabis does not have a drug identification number, so the cost is effectively out of pocket. You will occasionally hear very rare circumstances where insurance companies are covering some or all of the cost of a person's cannabis prescription, but it's really, really rare. So one of the things that we offer is our compassionate pricing promise, which is a 20% discount off the cost of the product. And what that is based on is either an annual individual income that falls below $29,000 a year, or if the individual receives any kind of federal or provincial support to their income, like we were talking about ODSP or CPP disability, Ontario Works, OAS. There's a large range of programs that they'll accept in order to be able to put that discount on the account. We recognize that without it having that drug identification number, it can be costly. So we try to help out best we can. Now, if you were going to leave the house with your medical cannabis and you were going to walk around legally with it, there's 2 things you need. You need the card that was given to you by the licensed producer. Says you're legally allowed to carry and use medical cannabis, when you expire, how much you're allowed to carry. And you would also need the product in the jar it was shipped in. And the reason that's important is this. Once you're registered with a licensed producer with an authorization to get medical cannabis, legally you're only allowed to order that cannabis from your licensed producer. Just because you have the card doesn't mean you can go anywhere and get cannabis from anyone. It only means you can get the cannabis from your licensed producer. So by having the card and by having the product in the jar it was shipped in, you're connecting the dots that, yes, I'm legally allowed to carry and use cannabis, and I ordered it from my licensed producer. And then, of course, you can only carry and use that product within Canada. Even if a person is traveling to a state or a country where it's legal, doesn't matter, only Canada.
Question.
Yeah.
You're saying you can, with the container that it comes in, you have to walk with that, but you also get those tubes that you can put your product in. So if you just have it in those tubes and not the canister that it comes in, is that out?
We generally say people better safe than sorry. Like as much as possible, try to have it in the jar that it was actually shipped in, just to try to help avoid trouble. We generally recommend it. Yeah. So again, those Tweed Main Street shops we were talking about, I work in the one in Toronto. There's one in Hamilton, Guelph, and Barrie. But again, for the reasons we talked about, no product on site. We ship all of our products through the mail as per Health Canada. So just our face-to-face version of our Help for People will help with that Certified Partners program, different roles like that. That's pretty much all I have, and I think we have about 10 minutes if there's any other questions that I can answer for people. Yeah, please.
Can you give some information on the CBD oil that is extracted from hemp, not from?
Yep, that's a very, very good question. So the question was about CBD and hemp. So the hemp plant and the cannabis plant that we derive our CBD oil from are two different kinds of plants, but both within the cannabis family. Now, when hemp is grown, it naturally produces incredibly low levels of THC. It also produces CBD, not in super high levels, so you use a lot of the hemp plant to get CBD, but you can extract CBD essentially from both. Right now, CBD products from the cannabis plant, the way that we derive it as a licensed producer, is still the only legal way to access CBD products. So you'll see for sale through various avenues, CBD hemp products and whatnot. The short answer is they're technically still not legal. Technically, unless you get it derived as it is through a licensed producer, which seems crazy, I know, because like there's no psychoactive effect to the CBD. I know we all recognize it's not terribly logical, but it is the rules. You'll see some arguments on, and then just the second half of that as to whether there's actually any difference between the products. You see arguments in both directions. Some people say there's no difference, whether it's CBD from the hemp plant or CBD from the actual cannabis plant itself. You'll hear other people saying the opposite, that the CBD from the actual cannabis plant is more effective, just because you get more of those secondary cannabinoids. There's this thing called the entourage effect, where it seems to be that all of these cannabinoids, when they're all together, is when they work the best. So you'll hear the argument that the other one's slightly more effective, but I'm sure it's personal opinion, like anything else. That question, it doesn't have much to do with what I'm doing here today.
But still, I'd like to know the
Yeah.
answer. So I go into a flower show and I say, okay, I want petunias and I want daisies.
Yep.
So is it a hemp plant and a cannabis plant? Are they two different plants or are they the same plant?
Not in the same plant. It's like a cousin. So it's like one is called like cannabis. I can't remember what the thing is. It's like cannabis X and cannabis Y. They're cousins. They're both the cannabis plant, but they're cousins. They grow differently. They do different things. People use them for different things. Hemp itself is generally grown for fibers, rope, material, things like that. Because like I say, it's still illegal to extract CBD from it. So when we grow the cannabis plant that we take the CBD from, it's not the hemp plant.
And does it come from the flower or does it come from the stem?
When you're using the hemp plant, it doesn't generally come so much from the flower because the hemp plant doesn't really produce flowers. You're usually generating the CBD products from the vast amount of plant itself. When we make our CBD products, it's extracted only from the bud because we're only growing female plants. Yeah. You do. It's a lot, and I'm the first to admit it. There is a ton of information out there around cannabis. It's a bit of a slog getting through the research. Yeah.
Hemp hearts, how they are connected to this hemp that we are talking about.
Yep, they are. So hemp
They are, and it's organic.
hemp hearts you can get legally. That is correct. They're considered a food source. They're the seed essentially that you would get from the hemp plant. They're like sunflower seeds in that sense almost.
But do they have any of those?
They have no. People consume them because they have like protein in them and like omegas and stuff like that. People don't get them for the therapeutic benefits. Any other questions? Yeah, please.
How does a chemical like Nabalone compare on the strength on these your scales here?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So Nabalone, from my understanding of the product, is a synthetic THC product, and I would say you'd probably see it in like the purple range, probably, if I had to make a stab at it. Just from the way people describe the effects that they get when they take the Nabalone, how they do get a bit of that high-ish effect to it, and because it is a synthetic THC product, yeah, I would assume it would probably be, probably with about purple. I don't know. That's a bit of a stab in the dark.
Could you tell us more about this certified partner program?
Absolutely. So that Certified Partners program, again, that's a program that we help with. So you contact us, and then we give you a list of different things we need. Often it will be if you have a list of any prescription medications that you're taking. It'll often involve a bit of a self-assessment. And then we kind of compile the information that we need, and we submit it to a doctor who specializes in prescribing cannabis. And they read over it, and they take a look at it, and then we help with setting up an appointment. It's usually done online through an e-portal system, and we'll say to you, okay, we sent the information into the doctor. We've set an appointment up for you for Tuesday afternoon. So you're going to want to sit down in front of your computer, and you'll have the appointment. You'll talk to a nurse practitioner. You'll talk to that doctor who specializes in prescribing cannabis, and you'll have that chat to decide if cannabis is right. If it is, they'll make the authorization, and they'll send it in to us.
So in this situation of your card, there's no additional referral from any doctors?
That's correct. We like to make it as transparent as possible to share that information back with your own physician, just to keep it within the circle of care, but that's up to the person.
Say my doctor said no.
And like I say, if the individual prefers to keep it confidential, that's no problem. We'll keep it confidential.
All the process up to receiving the oil itself or the product itself, it's free.
That is correct.
Then, okay.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. Yep, you have it exactly right. So like I say, if you were interested in that, through the website or by calling us would be your best place to start that process.
Calling.
It's on the little card. Yep, it's on the number on the back of that book as well as on the little cards I laid out as well. Yeah. Yeah, please.
If you can comment on it, for people with fibromyalgia, will the CBD oil in the yellow category help with pain, or do you have to go to a higher level?
Some people find the CBD on its own effective enough. It really honestly depends on the person. So I really couldn't say for sure. It's some people find, like a yellow product on its own would be sufficient enough. And again, different products for different times of day. Some people will do like yellow in the day, blue at night, for example. Yeah.
Does the doctor have control over like the level of the CBD? Like if the doctor makes the referral
Yes.
and he puts the meds and he says, does he have the control over what level you can go? No.
No.
I'm just thinking, if you start off at the lowest,
Yeah.
but you find it's not as effective, we can the input into.
That's correct. Yeah. And that's a very, very big part of the process in the sense that, like I say, when we get that authorization, it's just how much and for how long. Outside of that, it really is the individual. Hence why we try to provide as much support as we can. We recognize how difficult that can be. But at the same time, though, it's really nice to have control about what you take, when you take it, and how you're going to use it. So yeah, it's all in the individual's hands. Yeah. Yep. Any other questions? Yeah, at the back, please.
I want to know if we want to send this out with in the evening, you get really pretty and tired, and sleep is the biggest problem.
Absolutely. So if it was someone who was looking for relief for sleep, we would generally recommend more of an indica strain, more of that calm, relaxed feeling. And then you would want to look at products which have some THC in them, because it's actually going to be the THC that actually makes you feel sleepy. And that THC level is going to be up to the person's comfort level. But we generally recommend you'll probably start finding it effective, especially if you're not too experienced, even as low as like the blue, for example. That would usually be where we would say, let's start in that range. We still have the CBD to help with the pain. We have a THC level of about 10 to get started to see if that's strong enough. And then if the individual doesn't find that to be strong enough, then it would be increasing those THC levels, which is going to make it that much more effective for sleep. People also find that the oils seem to be a bit more effective for sleep, just in the sense that with the long-lasting effect of the oils, it helps to actually maintain sleep, rather than, with the dried, you may wake up after 2 or 3 hours and have to do the process all over, which can be a bit of a pain. Yeah. So everyone, I think that's about it, but I'm going to be tidying up, so certainly if you have any other questions, let me know. But thank you, and I hope you learned something. Thank you, everybody.